Hello, and welcome to Interview with Mike Billiot. Today, my guest is State Representative Damon Baldone. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Mr. Baldone.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me here.
I want to talk a little bit about the latest legislative session and how it's been affected by the BP oil spill. But first, I want my audience to know a little bit about you, the person.
Sure.
You grew up in Houma, Louisiana, did you not?
Yes, born and raised in Houma. Lived my
Okay.
whole life there.
And your parents, are they from Houma as well?
My father's originally from Birmingham, Alabama. He came to Louisiana because my uncle went to Tulane Medical School, and when my uncle, Dr. Joseph Baldone, was an eye doctor, took over Dr. Rudolph Ellender's eye practice in Houma. When my father finished college, he came to run my uncle's medical practice, and that's how my father got here. My mother was born and raised here in Grand Caillou, and been here for, that my side of the family. My mother's side of the family has been here for hundreds of years.
Okay, so your mother and father met when your father moved here to work for your uncle.
Yes, in the early 60s.
And how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one sister, Dana, and she lives in Allen, Texas with her husband, Chris, and 2 children.
Okay, now when your mother and father met, they had 2 children. Where did you all go to school when you were here in Houma?
I went to St. Francis from 1st through 7th grade, and then from 8th through 12th I went to Vanderbilt.
When you were going through school here in Houma, I guess that would have been the 80s?
Graduated high school in 82,
Okay.
so 70s and 80s.
So when you were growing up in Houma and you were going through school, your grade school and then high school, were you involved in student government? Did you have any plans of running for political office at that time?
Thought never crossed my mind. I was never just an average student. Wasn't involved in the student government association or anything. Played sports, played soccer, played some other things, played tennis and basketball, some other sports. So that's it. I kind of typical average kid.
What part of Houma did you grow up in? Where did your parents live?
I grew up in Old Houma, right by the tunnel. My parents actually still live there today. They moved there when I was about 9 months old, and so that's the only home I was raised in, and I loved it. Old Houma was great. You could ride bicycles everywhere.
Okay, so you said you graduated from Vanderbilt right here in Houma in 1982. What did you do after that?
When I finished Vanderbilt, I went to Nichols. I looked at the universities, and Nichols I thought was my best choice. It was close. Had the programs I wanted. I still lived at home and commuted. Saved me a lot of money, and I loved Nichols. It was a good transition from coming from, I guess, Houma was at that time still a small town, going to Nichols. A lot of my friends I know went to LSU and USL and didn't do so well the first year. They partied too much. But Nichols was a great school. I love it to this day. That's my alma mater.
What did you study at Nichols, and what were your intentions? If you didn't intend to be in political office as you are now, what did you intend to do? What was your studies at Nichols?
Well, my passion was sciences. I love the sciences, and my degree was in biology pre-med. Again, I told you my uncle was a doctor. I have a first cousin who's a doctor, and I think I gravitated towards that field because I was always very interested in the sciences. I did okay. I did well. I finished in 4 years, took a full load, but my grades were okay, but not exceptional. It's very, very competitive to get into med school, especially in 1986. And so I didn't get into med school right away. And at that time I decided, well, I'll just try again. So I tried a second year. But while I sat out that first year, I went to LSU and I taught a biology lab at LSU. I worked in a genetics lab and I took some more classes. Then after I didn't get in that next year, my uncle, who was a doctor, said, look, the medical field's not all it's cracked up to be. Why don't you take an interest test? So at his suggestion, I spent 2 days filling out little bubbles and taking an interest test.
And explain for those of us who don't know, what is an interest test? What was that meant to do?
It was meant to see what your capabilities are and what traits that you have that would do well in the workforce. And so, again, you just take all these interest tests and aptitude tests to see what you should do later in life. What you should succeed at. And after again doing that for 2 days and speaking with a consul who read through it and looked at it, out of 400 occupations, attorney came out #1, which really was a shock to me because I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be an attorney. Never crossed my mind to be an attorney. Now that I've practiced for 17 years as an attorney, I see why attorney came out number one. I think being a good attorney is not, because I was never argumentative. I'm not an argumentative person. I'm more of the opposite. I'm very much of a problem solver and a negotiator. I want people to avoid conflict. And I think that's a good trait of being an attorney, is to not necessarily be argumentative, but actually the opposite. Be a good negotiator, be a good problem solver. Try to make peace between the parties. And that's the traits that make you a good attorney.
So how'd you do on your interest test? I mean, after you said attorney came out number one, and then what do you remember what the other occupations were that they said you would be good at?
I don't. I actually don't remember anyone. You know, after I received that, I still wasn't convinced that I'd want to be an attorney. But at that point in my life, I wanted to be some type of professional, again, if I wasn't a doctor. And at that point in life, my uncle, who's the doctor, had discovered some drugs that he had patents for around the world. He was never married, never had any children, and so I was his godson. I kind of followed a little bit in his footsteps, and we were using more attorneys than we were medical doctors for my uncle's patents. It was a patent he made. He invented for a cure for a treatment, not a cure, for herpes and warts. And so I thought it was best I go to law school because every meeting we went to, we had lawyers there, and that would help me in the business world.
Gotcha. Now, what law school did you go to?
I went to Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge.
Okay. And after law school, what did you do? What was your first job? Did you work for a law firm? I think that's what most, when you graduate from law school, you're trying to work for the big law firms. And what law firm did you work for?
I didn't work for any law firm. When I finished school, I hung a shingle from day one. I graduated law school in 1992, and it was kind of difficult times at that point for attorneys. There weren't many job openings, and I always knew I kind of wanted to work for myself anyway. So from day one, I hung a shingle. And when you get out of law school, you really don't know how to practice law. You may know the law and the theory of the law, but you don't. You don't really know the procedures and everything. And so it was a difficult time, but you just picked it up and I did it.
Now, while it may be scary to graduate law school and try to find a job, it's also very scary starting your own business. Was this the first business that you owned, the law firm?
It was the first business I really owned, the law firm, and I guess when you're younger, you're not as scared of things. I was single. I didn't need much to live on. I didn't have to make much money. And in the first year as a lawyer, you don't make much money. Every dime I made, I went put into buying a desk or buying a computer, or so every dime you made goes right back into the law firm. But again, I was young and single and didn't need much money to live on. I was accustomed to living poor, so it wasn't a big deal.
Now, did your parents? I know your uncle owned a medical practice, and he also founded some patents. Mm-hmm. Did your parents or other grandparents also own businesses where starting and owning a business would seem natural to you?
Yeah, my father had a finance company from the time I was probably 2 or 3 years old until 8th grade. When he sold it, he went to work for First National Bank, which eventually turned into Whitney Bank. My grandparents also had like a little shrimp dock, just a mom and pop shrimp dock in Grand Caillou. So I guess it was in my blood. I mean, I've seen my relatives do it, and it was just something I gravitated towards.
Now, your maternal grandparents, your mother's mother and father, you said they owned a shrimp dock. Was that their main source of income?
Yes, that was. Yeah, that's what they did. They were in the shrimp business.
Okay, so that's been the shrimping business and the industry along the bayous. That's been part of your life for a long time. To
this day, I still have cousins that shrimps for a living, and I still have a lot of relatives on Grand Caillou and some in Montague and Chauvin.
Okay. Now, I know that you just ended the legislative session just on Monday. Yes. And I'd like to talk about that when we return back from the break, and also some what you are thinking about when it comes to your future political ambitions. Sure. We'll be right back with the interview with Mike Billiot.